Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to I Remember the Inland Empire. I'm Chuck Street. I grew up in the Inland Empire, and today we're going to remember an iconic business called Victoria Guernsey Dairy. And today's episode is going to be as much about an iconic business as well as an iconic family, an amazing family that was behind Victoria Guernsey Dairy. So I wanted to take this opportunity to introduce our special guest today. The Victoria Guernsey Dairy was founded and run by the Willis family, the great Willis family. And we have three members of the family joining us today to reminisce and to talk about what was really an amazing business that had a pretty big impact on the Inland Empire. So first of all, I wanted to introduce Hal Willis. Hal Willis, you can maybe wink at us or at least hold your hand up. That's great. And next to him, they're sitting together, is Tim Willis. And then joining us from Montana is April Willis. So April, thanks for joining us. The two brothers are now talking to us from Wairika, which is in Northern California near Mount Shasta. So thank you so much for joining us. What I'd like to do is to talk about how Victoria Guernsey Dairy got started. And maybe, Tim, you could start, we'll start out because you're the first person I talked to a couple of days ago. You talked about how your grandfather went to Wisconsin and bought some cows. Could you elaborate on that?
You know, he was a cheese maker originally and moved out to California. I'm not sure, did he go back and get cows, Hal?
Well, they saved up pennies. It was the start of the Depression in 1932. And so they literally, and this story was told to us many times, because Grandma and Grandpa and all of us lived on a 12-acre farm or dairy in San Bernardino. And they would tell us that they saved pennies. And Grandma actually had a drawer full of Indian head pennies in her drawer. And we would go through them and we'd steal some and
we would steal them,
and put them in for gumballs.
We were bad.
Yeah. And anyway, they saved up a bunch of pennies, and he went back to Wisconsin and bought 7 cows. And then on the ride back to California, he got in the boxcar with him to make sure that none of them would fall down and get hurt, because his investment was so dear to him that he actually rode with them all the way back to California. And that's what started the cows. And they got a bull, and that started our dairy.
Well, when he was 15, he left home and went to a cheese factory and worked. And that's where it really started. He started to get into the whole business.
I think we're seeing a picture of your grandparents. I'm seeing that on my screen. And they were really hardworking people.
Every day.
People, and they expected their children to be hardworking and their grandchildren.
Every day.
Every day.
Yeah, in fact, starting out, we didn't realize that people just didn't work every day like that until we went to school and learned what other their dads did. And so it was normal for us to get up and just go to the chores every day. And it was as normal as apple pie.
Well, when you say every day, you mean every day, even the weekends, right? Saturday and Sunday, because those cows
twice a day
had to be milked.
Every day they would build up 3 to 5 gallons of milk.
If you don't milk them, that's terrifying.
And they're in pain. They want it out. They want to be milked.
Yeah. So your grandparents started with 7 cows and 12 acres. And how big did the herd finally get?
We went up to about 400 milking heads.
I heard it was 1,200.
Yeah, it was got to be 1,200.
It was big.
At first, when the conveyor started, we had 800, and then it grew.
And they had 200 Holstein at the end for bulk.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of cows.
Because they produce more milk.
Yeah, we had 2 different kinds of cows. We had the Guernsey and the Holstein. Yeah. And the Guernsey has richer milk, but they only give 3 gallons, whereas Holstein has less cream in it, but they gave more of a quantity of 5 gallons. So then a lot of cows nowadays they produce larger amounts, and that's what a lot of the dairymen use.
Okay, so let's talk about your grandparents. And by the way, how long were they married?
Forever.
Forever. That's good enough.
I mean, he died at 92, so they probably got married pretty young.
Yeah.
So she lived to be 104, which I don't know if that
She was 102 when she died.
was it too. I
Yeah.
can't remember, but that's not a good idea. Don't live that long, Chuck.
I kind of like you.
Here's
Yeah.
a little side note about our grandparents. My grandmother's sister married grandpa's brother. So we have double cousins.
Yikes. Yikes.
Talk
Thank
about a clan. Talk about a family clan.
Uh-huh.
Thank you. I think I feel better.
I don't think we do.
Yeah. So
Well, you know, it was a small community, so you had to make it good, you know.
yeah, there weren't as many options, right? But thank God, because it worked out really well. So we're looking at a photo right now. It looks like an aerial photo of the dairy, probably in early days. And then there's a lot of open pasture there. And what are some of the structures?
Well, on the right of the picture is the barns that the cows stayed under. And this is probably some of the very first pictures of the dairy, because we probably weren't a gleam in the eye at the time. So this is new stuff for us to see. So this is the very beginning.
You see that little dark pile of trees on the left there, about in the middle of the picture?
Yes.
That's where we lived,
Yeah,
in the field. Okay. And the cows would occasionally walk up to the house and stick their head in the window in the morning and wake us up. You'd have liked it.
So they wanted to be milked, right?
They just want to see what's going on.
they are curious.
They're so curious.
Very curious. They don't have big brains, though, I have to tell you.
And then grandma and grandpa lived on the other end of the property. So
Upper right corner. There it
there's
is.
grandma's house and grandpa's house.
Yeah.
And we went there all the time. That was our little journey from our house to go across the property and to go to grandma and grandpa's. And I really like the concept of having your grandparents live with you. As I look back on it, I emotionally realized how valuable that was to have the whole family there. You can see the reasoning where they would talk to us about their memories, and it helped to broaden our life experience to prepare us for life. So I esteem it very valuable. Anyway, grandma and grandpa, they would make mush. So we'd have breakfast, mush. I mean, mush.
Cornmeal mush.
Mush. I still like it to this day.
That's your problem.
And then she'd make bread, wheat bread. This was the staples.
She made the best yogurt. Oh,
So you see the kids up on the haystack? That's where we spent most of our life, up on the haystack.
I can remember driving down Waterman Avenue with my family and seeing that huge haystack. Where did all of that hay come from? You stocked a lot of it. They must have found a good price on it and then grabbed it while they had the chance.
We have to buy it.
Yeah, they had semis bring in loads and loads of it. And then that was a big event to watch them, how they would stack it up in the hay barn. And so it was a big event to have a lot of hay like that. And then we would supplement their diet, the cow's diet, with the alfalfa and field corn, which we'd turn into silage. And we'd either do it between rows of hay and let the corn ferment, or we had a silo, we'd let it ferment in a silo. And the cows loved it. It smelled horrible, rotten, but the cows just thought of it as the most delicious stuff they could
and we
have.
put molasses in it too.
Yeah, the molasses on it, and then they, to me, I thought they thought it was ice cream, so they ate it with great delight.
So see those cows out there, Chuck?
Yeah.
If they happen to have a little one near them, and you walk out there, I've almost been killed so many times by them cows running me down. They jump up and just attack you.
Because they were protecting their young, right?
Yeah, and you'd hear the stump, da-da-dump, 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 and you turn around and man, they're on you. And they would kill you. I think they would. Dove into the manger a couple times just to get away.
We had a game we'd play with a bull. We have the bull pinned up,
Oh,
and then we would get in the corral with the bull. And of course, the bull didn't want any part to do with us and start charging for us. And so we would wait till the last second to dive back under the fence, and we'd see how close we could get to the bull without getting hit. So that
I
was
thought it was scary. Why would you do that?
it was
for fun.
very entertaining.
It's for fun. Come
If
on.
you were bored, just go down to the bullpen.
Mhm. Yeah.
It would alleviate any boredom quickly.
Now, how many kids would have that opportunity to play with a bull? That wasn't part of my childhood. Now we're looking at another picture on the screen. What do we see here?
So the big building is where they process the milk.
That's where they milked cows. They would come up in there, and that's the barn and the
Milking,
the
yeah.
creamery, because they would they'd milk it in the barn there, which is the far end of the picture there on the building, and then they would send it through the pipes into the creamery where they
The
would
big tank. Yeah.
cool it down, and then in the beginning days we just would bottle it, but later on we process it, homogenize and pasteurize it to eliminate the bacteria by heat flashing the heat on it, and then we put it in a holding tank, and then run it to the bottling machines, and then we would put it in the bottles like this. And this bottle is way back from the beginning in the 30s. This is the old
And
time
then
bottles.
they put it in a truck. There's the truck.
Oh, gosh.
And they drive it to everybody's house at 4 a.m.
But that was in the 60s. At the beginning
Yeah.
time in the 30s and 40s and 50s, people would come into the dairy and walk up there and then get their order. And then we developed
Dump it in the bucket.
where they would drive up. This was a huge advancement. Drive up, sit in your car, and then say, I'd like 6 bottles of milk and some butter and some eggs. And you would go in and get it and come out to the car and say it's $5.60, and then you give them their change. So that we had 6 of those cash and carries built up in the later part of the dairy.
Little drive-through things,
And it was a very novel service to have that kind of advantage, to have that process. And it was we don't have that very much nowadays, so life is quite different now.
Well,
But
it was fun. It was fun when we had to work. We'd run out and we'd get their orders and run back, and it was fun to do that. We visited with all the people that would drive through. I liked it.
And there's the old time cars. That's in the 30s, where
30s,
they
yeah.
drove up there, so we had to drive up there sooner than I thought. And they would drive up and get their orders, place their order.
Didn't you think that was the 30s, Mike, back then, those cars?
Looks like 30s, early 40s.
But it also looks like the drive-through at today's In-N-Out Burger.
Yes, it does.
Same thing. But now that's another point, is that In-N-Out likes to suggest that they were the first ones with a
No.
drive-through service, but that's not true. It was probably Victoria Guernsey.
I
Yep.
think this is the first one, really, in the
Yeah,
country.
it was.
Yep.
So,
We had a little pamphlet made at the dairy that we handed out with all the, they deliver the milk at 4 a.m, they started delivering these pamphlets, and inside of it, it says that we were the first ones.
See,
that
there you
time.
go. That proves it right there.
Yes, see, we said so.
see, it all
there-
started there. It all started at 9th and Waterman, and now we see drive-throughs all around the world,
Mhm.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
For sure. So now we're looking at a picture. It looks like it'd be inside the milking barn.
Right.
And I can't tell, at least looking at the picture here, eventually your father came up with an innovation like a conveyor belt, right? For
Mhm.
the milking process. Can you talk about that?
Well, Grandpa and Dad did. They both did it together.
They had somebody had kind of came up with with that idea, and then they actually put it into motion. Is what they did.
The cows would come up on the watering, where they would walk through a spray that would spray their udders and clean off the.
There it is. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, they
Ow.
walk through the water there, and then come down into a single file, and then begin to go on the track that would
There it is.
have a little bucket in front of them. They're lining up to get ready to go on the little track there. And then in the front, they have some grain. So the cow wants to go up there and get in that little confined space.
But it took years to train those cows. They're not really, they don't have big brains,
Anyway, this is the track right here.
They wouldn't do it at first.
And the advantage of having this system was having the first guy there would dry off the udder and then apply the milking machines. Then the cow slowly goes down the track as the milk's being pumped into the glass containers that ride along the side. And as it gets to the end, they're filling up now, gets to the end, one other gentleman will take off the cow machines, and then the cow will exit left there. And so two people could literally milk many cows as compared to the day when you had to hand milk and then had to put the machines on
Good point. Yeah.
in the barn. So this was an advantage. But with everything, the rest of the story is it was great innovation on Dad's part. And then Grandpa backed him up. But Dad was the innovator, and then he was the maintenance and the creator of this process, because it was ad libitum, because there was nothing else in the United States like this. And consequently, we were written up in many magazines and awarded a primary goal or reward for having an innovative milking machine. And then I don't know if that's the award right there, but
Yep, there they are.
and there's Dad, his mother, Della Willis, and then Robert Willis, and then Jim Willis on the far right. And that's their whole family right there.
You think that's Jim?
I don't, that's Jim, is it?
Yeah.
This is
Wow. And there you are, April. Isn't that you?
Yeah.
There you go.
Say.
I must say that your family album of photos is pretty entertaining. It's a lot different than mine, that's for sure.
Well,
But you talked about this innovation really being cutting edge, and that it was in many publications. I heard it was also in Popular Mechanics.
yeah, it was in all that stuff.
Yeah, it was really written up. I didn't realize at the time, it's just Dad's doing this thing, but later looking on it, it was quite acclaimed as a novel invention.
Big bucks too.
But it was a
Expensive.
real labor of love, because there's many moving parts on it.
Yeah,
So,
you have to fix it all the time.
there's pros and cons on anything. The maintenance and the development of it was
Every once in a while a cow would get stuck in there.
quite challenging.
And then how do you get a cow out of there?
Yeah, true. That's true.
Yeah, cut it up, cut the sides out, and
So when it works really good,
It
it's
works.
really good. And anything short of that is not quite as good.
Well, I find that with aircraft. When it's working, it's really good, but when it's not,
Really good.
Yeah, that's
It's not
not a
good.
good. That's not a good thought. That's
Yeah.
not a,
well, we're looking at a picture now of your delivery trucks, which you indicated that maybe presented themselves in the late 50s or early 60s. But you boys in particular, part of your job was to wash those trucks on a regular basis, right?
Me and Timmy,
continuously.
Right.
that's where I learned how to drive.
Yeah, they had a funny way of driving those things. They had a pedal, it was just,
Mhm.
it was fun.
I think
They
they
were-
stood. Didn't they stand up when they were driving? Or
You stand up on that
Yeah,
thing. Yeah,
you stand up.
You're
and
sitting
drive.
down on the job. Come on.
yeah.
Stand there.
So those were dispatched all around the Inland Empire to deliver milk in the very early morning hours.
Mhm.
Yeah, they
so-
would load up the milk, and then they'd go to our ice machine and then put ice on top of it. So that was the refrigeration.
Okay, so obviously as it was driving along, it was leaking water. It had,
Continue.
at least that part of it had no carbon footprint, right?
That's right. We were ahead of our time.
Actually, they picked up all the bottles too and took them back. It was pretty
Yeah.
clean. Yeah.
That's true. Yeah, they were recycled. That's when recycling first began.
No.
So you got the bottles back and they had to be washed, and then
Yeah.
Oh,
They
yeah.
had a bottle washer, a great big huge one too.
See, we have a model of our truck.
Yep.
So it's a our only relic that we have left of our milk trucks.
I can't believe you still have that.
I can't either.
Oh, it has to be a family heirloom. Now, I remember those trucks and they had an unusual front end. Who made those trucks? Do you remember?
I thought it was GMC.
I don't know.
I think that's who it was back in the day, but I can't verify that.
I can't add to that one.
Yeah, I don't know why. I just was wondering because it was something you didn't see. It was built specifically for that purpose, I think. So you had a lot of those, and so the influence of Victoria Guernsey was spread out throughout the Inland Empire, with those trucks driving around. Did any of you ever take one of those routes as a fill-in, or?
No,
I don't think we ever did, actually.
no. The most we ever did was as far as having hands-on milk was working in the drive-ups, the cash and carries.
And
And
Well, we worked at the creamery though.
Oh, one summer, Roland, who was running the creamery, he was a great guy. He had to take a vacation because he was burning out. So they said, okay, we need somebody to run the creamery, which was up on Baseline by this time. And guess who that was? Me. They made me do it all summer long. So it was a April, Hal, they all were in there too. We're all.
Yeah.
we worked in the bottling, the creamery, bottling the milk, and then using a hand cart to wheel in the stacks of milk. And the bottle washer, we had the big bottle washer where they put the bottles in to get them cleaned up, and then they go down a track into the filler department. And so we went through each phase of the process from the milking to the actual bottling and then the refrigeration. So growing up, that's where we'd all run around, little kids playing all through this area.
Actually, you could sleep on top of the bottle washer. It's huge, it's so nice and warm up there. I'd climb up there and
It was about 20 feet long.
Oh, it's huge.
Well, you certainly learned the business.
I liked it when we started using cartons for the milk, and
Mhm.
we put up huge stacks of cartons into the machine. It was fun.
Yeah.
Every day after school. Where do you think we were?
Well, here's a picture, I think, of a couple of you kids. Is that right? Who are we looking at?
Those two guys.
That's us, Hal and me.
The tall one is me.
Yeah, so what?
And and then I was named after Dad. Dad's Harold Willis, and then I'm Harold Willis II. And
I didn't have that kind of luck.
And so I'm very proud of it. And then the second one to the right is Timothy Willis.
Thanks, you spared me. He's not going to tell you my middle name.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, but you go by Hal now. Hal.
Yeah,
Oh, there's
Hal.
Tim.
Oh yeah, I got some hair there, don't I?
Now, this must have been taken in the 60s, right?
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's 70s. I don't know. No, yeah, it's 60s.
That looks
Late
like me.
80s.
That's me.
No,
That's
that's
you?
me.
Yeah. By then, the butch haircuts were out of style, right?
Yeah.
I just thought I'd grow some hair like I'm doing right now, if you notice.
Yeah. Okay. Well, again, you operated an iconic business in the midst of pop culture, and that's what people were doing our age, at that time. So good. So here's one of the looks like one of the drive-through locations. I think you indicated that there were 6 of these locations spread out throughout the Inland Empire. The one closest to my house was on Del Rosa.
Del Rosa. Mhm.
Which was you could drive through, and you could pick up other supplies, candy and I think just a lot of other stuff that the drive through. But the other thing that might seem incongruous is the fact that you also sold gasoline at those locations, right? And I was, of course, as we record this interview now, we are in the midst of a crisis with the prices of gasoline. I just paid $6 a gallon recently. But I have a memory, and I share this with my kids, and they just can't believe it, of pulling into the Del Rosa location and buying and putting $2 worth of gas into my Volkswagen, and it was 23.9 a gallon.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
It was bloody cheap.
Yeah, it was my job to make credit cards in the office for it too.
wow. So this is just a
Yeah.
side story. I know we're talking about the dairy and milk production, but how did you get into the gasoline sales business?
Well, Dad was had a vacation in Europe, and he noticed this one fellow was filling his car up, and he went over and said, "Well, where's the gas attendant?" And he goes, "Well, no, this is self-service. You just pay with through the office, and then you fill up and pay every month." So when he thought about that, and he thought, "Boy, that's a grand idea." So when he got back to the States, he thought, "Well, I'm going to put in some gasoline stations," and so he built a number of self-service gasoline stations.
He
Boy,
was
what
the
a-
first one. He was the first one to bring computerized self-service gas stations to California.
Anyway, it was a very
Really?
novel thought at the
Mhm.
time, self-service, and they called it quick save.
Mm-hmm.
So they
Quick-
built, quick save. I
It
thought,
was cool.
So April, when you talk about the credit card, I know nowadays we slide the credit card into the pump and it'll authorize your purchase. Is that what happened originally, or you had to take it inside to the office and give them your credit card and then have
It
them
was the manual thing where you sweep it across the card and sign the ticket.
with the carbons? It had several
Yeah.
carbons.
Yeah.
And all of that. So, but that's interesting. You had the location, people were already used to driving through, and then you didn't have to hire a gas attendant to put in the gas. I remember when that transition happened, and it almost seemed shocking, but because before you were led to believe that it was so dangerous. You had to be highly skilled and trained to be able to pump gas. We've certainly found something different. So now, Hal, you talked about delivering supplies and mainly milk to the various satellite drive-through locations.
yeah, one of the jobs on a dairy, which is mainly to do from A to Z, the production and the processing, and then the delivery of the products to these stores. And so we had a mechanic that lived and stayed right at the dairy, because they had all those milk trucks, and then they had the delivery trucks, and then we had the semi that would load up and then go around to these 6 different cash and carries and offload their order to the stores 2 times a week. And so I would go in at 3:30 in the morning and fill up my truck with all of the 6 different orders in my truck, and then pull out, and then the rest of the day I would go to these stores and offload their order. And so it was
Sarge, that was the mechanic.
Sarge was the, and anyway, so we would he kept the semi going, and it was a real old semi. So I had 3 different gearboxes, and I'd have to shift 2 hands to hold the wheel with my arm and shift the gearboxes. Nowadays they have automatics for the semi. And so then it was, and then I would be driving it so many days, so many hours, that one time I forgot to push in the clutch. And if you have the right RPM, you can just shift it without a clutch. So from then on, after I got going, I didn't use the clutch. You just the right RPM, and slides in like butter.
I wouldn't
Oh,
spread that around a lot, but
Now, how old were you when you were doing those deliveries?
I was 21, 22.
Okay, so you were out of high school, but you actually kind of enjoyed that, didn't you? Driving the truck.
I loved it. Still to this day, I love it.
Yeah.
I enjoy driving big rigs.
And this is before the time when they had pallet jacks. Did you have one of those lifts, those hydraulic lifts on the back of the truck?
Yeah, we had one on the side. You pull the stacks of milk out on the side, and then lower down the lift, and then pull the stacks of milk with a hook. You put a hook in the bottom of the
you
milk
drag it,
case,
yeah.
and then drag it on the cement into the cold room. And it was a fair amount of exercise.
Yeah, I bet. Those are long days. Now, you mentioned that you started your day at 3:30 a.m.
Yeah.
So when you're working those kind of hours, that kind of gets in the way of a social life on the previous evening, right?
Well, yeah, you didn't want to start work with a half a tank, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But the dairy, having the family business was very important to have. And we were very proud of our dairy and dad and grandpa. And so it was quite consuming as far as the responsibility. So it was a delight to work there.
Yeah, well, that's good. So, well, so 6 locations. And then eventually there came a point where I think the city was moving in on you, and they wanted some of the land that was 12 acres originally of the dairy. They wanted the land to build a school. And tell us about how that happened. And eventually it led to the demise of the dairy at that site, right?
It was brutal. Yeah, it was a brutal thing. They just came in. This is a city that you loved, and they decided they're going to be hungry, and they condemned it, and they wanted to steal it. They didn't want to pay a market value for the whole thing. So it became a big loss, and they lost. So it was nice. At least we won a little better price, but they still took it. They took about half of our pasture.
So what kind of effect did that have on the production of the milk?
It made it very complicated.
Well, we moved around. We bought another dairy around the block.
McDonald's, yeah.
McDonald's.
McDaniel's.
That's
what it
Daniels,
was.
yeah.
Yeah, that's what it was.
And then there that we use that is just the creamery processing for the milk. So it was minus the cows in the fields. It was just the processing part of the milk.
It was brutal, really, pretty much.
So there was it was kind of almost a desperate thing to save the business, right? And by the way, we're looking at a picture of one of your glass milk bottles, which was so iconic. But eventually, it sounds like it just didn't. It became no longer feasible to produce enough milk because you didn't have enough acreage. So that meant that you probably sold the herd, and then you continued with your other 6 satellite locations, but you purchased milk from other dairies, probably in the Chino area, because that area was still pretty open. But then there was a decision to take the land that was left that used to be the dairy and to turn it into a retail shopping center. How did that happen?
So I think it was originally was it a Kmart? Kmart, yeah.
Kresge.
Yes, Kmart came, and it was a huge deal.
It's $100,000 floor.
Very big, yeah. And that was there for a long time until
it was a turnkey lease deal.
They closed it because they couldn't stop the theft. That's how that went. People were stealing them blind. Well, does that sound familiar?
Well, they left without completing their contract, and they left Dad high and dry, and so he had to make the payments on the building. So the pendulum on the business changed when we had the property there. We built the Kmart, and then he also built Taco Bell, and so we had to diversify because life's changing. It's not the day of grandma and grandpa on the dairy anymore. It's survival, and you get businesses going that create a cash flow, and so whatever will create that cash flow, and I put in Del Tacos and Taco Bell, and then other restaurants on that 12-acre property, and that was
a Chinese food restaurant.
Chinese food. So Dad diversified, and so now the complexion of us growing up on the farm or the dairy was completely changing, and and then our lives also diversified into other interests. And so to go back to the dairy and see Dad in the office and then remember all these memories of the farm, it was really difficult.
Well, you considering that your grandparents started with just 7 cows, and what you grew it into out of that location. I mean, it's really an amazing story. You had the 6 different satellite locations, but I guess time marches on, and things change, And just how the business evolved is really amazing, but you have to pivot, right? You have to pivot
To
and-
survive. Yeah, that's a 99-cent store. That's up there, kind of like right where the creamery was, wasn't it?
And it goes when Grandpa and Grandpa started the dairy there in 1932. Waterman Avenue, for everybody who remembers what Waterman Avenue looks like. Now, when they started, it was a dirt
It's
road.
a dirt road.
And now it's a great big freeway or road that goes clear across the valley, San Bernardino Valley. And it's just really interesting to know that they started when the population was a lot less and the roads were less. And then
It was out in the country. Yeah.
and then the evolution of changes
Mhm.
are quite phenomenal, because there was quite a bit of changes over a 40, 50-year period.
So there he is in the opening of the 99-cent store. He's standing out there.
This is your dad, Harold.
Yeah, right there. Yeah, you can see
And
him
then,
waiting.
so, but what a pivot, for
Yeah.
him to have grown up on that property and in the dairy business. And then he had to figure out, like, what do we do now? And so you try to make the best of it. So then you became like a landlord, facilitating the retail business. Now, were your grandparents still living when all of this started to happen, when the city moved in and wanted to take the property or part of it by eminent domain? Did they witness some of this?
Yeah, they were.
I
they
think
were-
so.
They were there because we moved our
House
house
to McDonald,
to
to McDaniel's. Yeah.
McDaniels, and so relocated Grandpa and Grandma up there. And then
Yeah.
they make the best of it. Grandma got into we always had a huge garden on the dairy. Grandma was forever working in the garden. So when they relocated to the other place, Grandma had relatively a smaller garden, but still had a garden. And then she would grow comfrey, the herb, and then use that on her skin, because
She thought that was going to save her. Yeah.
she had cancer at age 50, 55. And she went to the doctor and she says, well, I'm going to use this comfrey on that. And the doctor says, that's poisonous. And then she used it all the time, and she lived to 102 years old. So
I thought it was 104.
wasn't too toxic.
It was 102, and she used to take a bath in comfrey water.
Yeah, so she grew lots of comfrry.
And I'm not sure that's a good idea, but
But
Well,
it must have helped, yeah, because she lasted, a very long time. Now we're seeing a picture now who I think is your dad.
yeah, that's a gal from the Valero gas
Okay.
company.
So
Yeah.
now the family business it existed, but it's so much different than it was in the early days. So now the family business involves several Valero gas stations, and then
Mhm.
also Del Taco locations, correct?
Mhm.
5 of those. 5
Yeah.
Delta.
And then you still have the property where the farm was, and it's now a kind of a variety type business with a
Well,
lot of.
it's the 99-cent store. Then they have a strip mall along the side. You don't have, well, you might have a picture of it in there. You can see it. So there's a strip mall, there's a 99-cent store, and the old Kmart. And the old Kmart's has been taken over. Well, they lease it out now to a Korean company that has Mexican tiendas in it. Lots of little shops in there. Go figure.
Yeah, well, that's probably appropriate because there's a lot of Hispanics who live in this San
They're
Bernardino Valley.
really successful.
Mhm.
Really successful. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's
Worked.
great. So the thing that I thought was interesting is that you kids, you really worked hard. And it wasn't until later that you realized how hard you really worked.
I liked it.
But it would sound, because it was a family business, there was always something happen. It was very dynamic. But your parents also believed in the importance of getting a good education. Now, April, you went to Europe, to Switzerland, to school, right? And then you
Yeah.
studied fashion.
Mhm.
And then tell us about what happened, after that. You've been involved in costume design, and then some other things too. Maybe you could tell us what you were up to after you left the dairy.
Well, I learned how to sew in a very early age. In 8th grade, my grandma gave me a sewing machine because she couldn't figure out how to work those fang dangle machines. So she just gave it to me. And so I learned how to sew in the 8th grade. And when I graduated, I started taking child psychology and stuff at the university in La Sierra, but I didn't like it so much. So I decided to go to Europe and Switzerland, and I got my degree in fashion. And it's always been something that served me well because I love sewing. And then I branched out into the health field, joined Tim at the dental school, and that's it. Then I had 4 kids.
Well, that
And-
takes the time, that takes your attention, that's for sure, but raising children. And so Tim, you went to dental school, correct?
I did, yeah.
And then
Somebody,
you had a thriving practice up in where you live now, Wairika. And I've heard that you're pretty popular with you just recently retired. I heard you're pretty popular with your patients because of the kind of work that your practice offered, and also because of your personality, right?
I don't know. It's like everything else. I like to work. It's fun. So I always made it fun down there, for everybody. So we had a fun time, 40 years of fun.
Yeah, he sang to his patients.
Yeah, he's a
Some
musician.
jokes. Yeah. They enjoyed the whole visit.
Yeah. Okay, and then Hal, what did you do? We know you went into the Army and you served in Vietnam, and you were a medic. That was a very, very dangerous job in the military in Vietnam. Tell us why that was especially dangerous.
Well, when we went out on a mission into the jungle, a lot of times the enemy would have the area, because they lived out there, they'd have it all set up with knowing full well where the landing zones and the areas were. And so every time we went out, they would spring their traps. And some of the first shots that would be fired is to hit the radio man, the leader, and the medic. And that would demoralize the group, and they could more easily overpower the group and kill everybody. So the first sign of action, it was very intense. It was like just thousands of rounds and explosions going on. And at first I didn't realize that they didn't like the medic and how their technique was, but it became pretty clear after a while that being a medic was more dangerous.
It's harder practice.
Yeah, I felt like a bunny running around out there. They were shooting at a bunny.
Yeah.
And I went out on, after a while, I thought I wouldn't make it, because I thought that a year of this, and only by God's protection
Busy.
that I made it. And I felt him around me. I'd say my prayers, and I could feel his presence around me. And I felt good about that. I just didn't know if it meant I would live or I would see him, but it felt good. And then, so I came back to the States, and then I went to college, took pre-med, and then went in and 4 years of chiropractic training. So after 8 years, I graduated as a chiropractic doctor, and then had my practice here in Wairika. And that's where Tim and we had our practices and met similar, the same patients that he would go to. And then I retired years ago, and then now I'm here and I work at a fruit stand. And it's one of the best jobs I've ever had.
You're a fruit
cake. Well, I would imagine that if you, as your patients, you got acquainted with your patients, they probably never imagined what your background was, how you grew up on a dairy farm, how you were actively involved in the operation of the dairy farm.
Yeah, and that's why the fruit stand was such a delight, because it had the owner of the fruit stand, he has all this good fruit, which on the farm or in the dairy, we had all these fruit trees, and we were self-contained with all the different fruits. So that touched me deeply, and that's why I got the job there, because it reminded me of home. And so, and then I work in the town where I had my practice. And so many times people come up and they go, "Oh, hi, doctor. I'd like to buy some fruit." Okay. And so it seemed normal to a doctor to work at a fruit stand, and nobody even blinks an eye about it.
I don't.
Well, we're kind of getting to the end of our discussion here, but I wonder if each of you could comment on the kind of people your grandparents were, the kind of people your parents were, because they seem like people with tremendous character and an unbelievable work ethic. To do what you did, they had to be very, very positive people and believe in the future and their own ability to influence the future. So maybe I'm taking the words out of your mouth, but April, let's start with you. Well, how would you talk about your grandparents and your parents?
My grandparents were hard workers, and they kept their nose to the grindstone all the time. And we all kind of just fit in around their world. And many days we'd just go to the dairy and we'd do an odd job and they'd stick us on something. And that's just what we did. It was a family business. We fit in wherever we had to. But my dad and mom were really hard workers too. My mom had 5 kids. She worked her buns off. And dad, he was gone all the time. He was working, fixing broken things, on tractors, and coming home just covered with dirt. And they all worked their buns off. So that just seemed like a little normal thing for all of us.
Yeah.
And I think that even it kind of ripples down the line, because my kids are all really hard workers, and I know theirs are too. So I think that's just something that was instilled in us. And our mother was a real live wire. She always was learning something new. She was in the chiropractic class behind Hal in, the time when everybody's retiring. She's just running off and making a new profession.
At
So,
age 50.
yeah.
She
So,
was a nurse too, Abe. So
yeah, she was a nurse, and she worked in the lab at the dairy and took care of all the cultures. And my mom just was a real go-getter too.
Yeah. So Tim and Hal, if can you comment further on your grandparents and your parents and the kind of people they were, and then perhaps how it influenced you both?
I mean, Grandma actually had a Sunday school next door actually for like my whole life. She would go over there on Sunday and teach Sabbath school on Sunday. And it was like a lot of work, So you work at a dairy, then you run over. Phew.
Everybody there knew her by grandma too. She wasn't just our grandma. She was everybody's grandma.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Grandpa, there wasn't one day he didn't work. Every day.
Did they ever take vacations?
I don't remember that.
I think maybe I think we went down to Mexico a bunch. We Portecitas and then I think they went to South America. Then occasionally they did something, but it's so rare. It's hard to remember.
99% worked. Grandpa and Grandma.
I don't think they ever took a vacation.
I don't think either.
I think their Grandma and Grandpa come from a creed of just where you just work and to survive. And Grandma, she came across the plains when she came out to California, and they built a sod house out of the dirt, and then that's how they lived. So these people grew up tough as nails, and it never changed.
I have this memory of our grandpa when he got done with a hard day. He'd come home and eat something really quick, and he'd go in and sit next in a hard chair. He'd sit next to this big old radio that was as big as we are, and he'd dig the paper out, and he read the paper from cover to cover and listened to the news, and that was his deal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
His comfort level. Yeah.
So, but not to use I guess I'm using a cliche. They just don't make them like they used to, do they?
No, No,
Never.
and Dad was a real good worker too. Dad was very intelligent, and Dad had a very fruitful mind as far as figuring out solutions to challenges, and he was very intelligent. And but he did a number of things that that didn't work out good, but he also learned from it. And so a lot of times, if you don't have things that don't work out, you're just not going to make progress. So, it's a give and take process to go forward. So the thing I think in the Willis family is that they keep trying. They, you get back up and you keep going down the trail. And I think that's one of the best things to learn from mother and dad and grandma and grandpa. Get up and
Really
get back.
resilience.
Yes.
And so they had to have been optimists. I mean, they believed in the future. They believed in their own abilities to meet the future and to come up with innovations that would be exciting and hopefully eventually profitable.
Determined would be a better word too. They really, if they're going to do it, they do it. They did it.
I think that was one of the things is if you want, I think it was taught to us, we learned is you want to accomplish something, you have to put 100% into it, or you would just take a couple of steps down that trail and then get off the trail. But in life, if you want something, you go 100%. And that has paid off big time in all of our families. It's 100% or none.
Well, on that note, how wonderful it has been to talk with you, to talk about Victoria Guernsey, an iconic business in the Inland Empire, and really to become acquainted with your family, who you have so much to be proud of. I think it's appropriate that some type of monument maybe be placed in that spot. This was the former location of Victoria Guernsey Dairy, created by and operated by the Willis family. And I'm here to step up and say, let's get that done, because it's certainly appropriate.
I don't know where to put it now, though.
Oh, thank you very much. That's really sweet. A lot of firsts were started there. A lot of firsts, just as well as McDonald's was the first one in San Bernardino.
Drive through.
To start. So there's a lot of firsts in San Bernardino.
Taco Bell, Taco Tia.
Yeah, for sure. So, all right. Well, listen, thanks to the three of you for joining us. And continued good health and good luck. Hopefully you all live to be over 100 because you have the right genetics, I think, and you take care of yourselves. And thank you so much for sharing your stories about the family and about Victoria Guernsey.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
So that concludes this episode of I Remember the Inland Empire.